What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Lunchtime live stream. And there's already a few people logged on right now, and a few people will be getting on here in just a second. Just a few real quick announcements, things going on in the church to let you know about. As we've said the past few weeks, we got a Thanksgiving offering coming up November 22nd. That's just in a few weeks. It's time to start praying. What am I going to give to help us take care of this amazing building that God kind of laid in our lap? And we're going to be doing that, getting the building up to code and working on that. Officially now we can say we have a live Catalyst Thanksgiving night of worship coming up Tuesday, November 24th at 7. We've been doing these now for a few years, and people just really enjoy them. And so we're excited that we get to do this live. We are definitely in need of more nursery and children's workers. Jenny let me know that we need 2 nursery workers. We need a toddler teacher. We need a preschool teacher. We need a K through first grade teacher. And we need 4 helpers. Now, these positions are not every week positions. They are once a month positions. So if you're interested in helping out with that, please contact Jenny at jross@catalystchristian.net. Also, as many of you know, we got a church plant that's kicking off next year with our youth minister, Rob Harlemert, as the lead. And we are going to be selling these Elevate t-shirts for $10. And I say we as in they are going to be selling these $10 Elevate t-shirts. They look pretty awesome. You just got to contact Rob or go to Elevate Church or ElevateLex.church. When you get there, you can find everything you need to know about those shirts by scrolling to the bottom of the website. Now, this week, we continued in our series, The Prep Work. We're talking about spiritual disciplines. We've talked about prayer. We've talked about study. And this week, we talked about the beast within, which is submission. And so we're going to be talking a lot about submission today. And to kick things off talking about this, I just want to ask a question up front. And that question is, do you find it difficult to be submissive? And so I'm going to bring Rob in here with me right now. How's it going, man?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. Let me ask you a question, man. There's been a joke going around this church for a while with the staff. And that's, when Dave and you and I are hanging out and Dave says something, you just look at him and say, don't tell me what to do.
Yep.
Do you find it difficult to be submissive, Rob?
Not if it's explained well.
Okay.
So I won't do anything that I don't want to say that. I will do stuff, but if it doesn't seem urgent or it's not explained well to me, or I don't probably see a reason to do it, then I probably just won't do it. But if you sit there and explain to me, like, it's going to help me out, this is the reason, you're like, oh yeah, I'll do it right now. That's fine. I always tell the joke about with my mom and my dad would tell me to take out the trash. Take out the trash, and I'd just sit there. And like, why don't you take out the trash? I'm like, well, it's just sitting there. I'll do it eventually. But then my dad finally figured out that if he was like, hey, if you take out the trash now, it would really help because it's not going to sit there. I can get some other things done. And if he did that, I was like, yeah, sure.
So you were kind of a pain in the butt as a kid. Is that what you're saying?
I guess it wasn't like a thing that I like actually wanted to do. It was just
right.
like,
and we're already getting yeses. So Maria, my wife, of course, said yes. And then Renee Basham said she's type A. So for her, it's a yes too. Submission is a hard thing, man. Submission's a hard thing to really.
What about you, John?
Do. What do you think?
I've got to tell people.
I'm curious if you were to answer, if someone was to say, do you think John struggles with being submissive? What would your response be?
I would say yes, but you do submit. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a reluctant submitter.
Yeah.
I would 100% agree.
That is the perfect description of you.
I am an absolute reluctant submitter. I don't
do it.
Yeah. Submitting.
Yes. Yeah.
Dave's main thing this week this is really good. He says submission is laying down the terrible burden of having to have your own way. And my wife, he's a yes, he fights it.
Yeah.
So it's a true story. Submission is laying down the terrible burden of having to have your own way. When you hear that or read that, what goes through your head? What do you think? What do you think this whole terrible burden of having your own way? What is that?
I think it's a fight with reality.
Yeah.
And so people have burdens in their life, and most of them are done to themselves. And this is a perfect description of, if you want to get your own way, you're just going to be frustrated your whole life.
It's the truth. That's the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
And it is a burden, because when I think when you're that person that has to have your own way with everything, if
Yeah.
it doesn't go your way, you can't be happy.
Yeah.
And so there's a level of misery that accompanies this idea of having to have your own way all the time. And so I think that's a big part of it. I think it is a burden. And but submission, the best way I can describe submission to somebody who's really caught up in themselves is like if I was sitting here talking to you right now in Swahili. You can't pick out Swahili. You can't speak Swahili.
No.
I don't think people who are all about themselves can even speak submission. I don't think they can comprehend it. As a matter of fact, if you read in Romans 8:7, it says, the mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. So I think it's a language barrier. I think
good.
there's
like
a disconnect when we have to have our own way. And when we get to that point where our flesh is the number one governor of what we do, it is impossible to be submissive to God or anyone. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I 100%. I'm with you on this one. There is this always idea of earthly and spiritual warfare, and the idea that the most important thing is what's to come. And there's always going to be this thing inside of us that wants things for us, whatever that is. It says governed by the flesh, is always going to be something that we're going to lean towards. We're going to lean towards things that make us comfortable, things that we want to do, things that that happen right now, like not having patience, like the immediates of that. But that is the exact opposite of what God's law is. And whenever we fight against God's law, you're going to lose. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to lose. You're not going to be walking with God, and you're going to be confused the whole time.
Yeah, I think the thing about submission that's hard, and maybe it's just me, it's just this idea that it puts somebody else in control. And I will admit wholeheartedly that I'm a control freak.
Okay.
If I'm in a situation, I want to have control of it. I don't like when other people have control, because I don't always trust that other people have anyone else's best interest, much less mine, in mind when they're doing what they're doing. And so I have the struggle with, I don't want to let up my ability to be in control. But I think whether we want to admit it or not, we're all slaves to something.
Yes.
I think we're all slaves to something, whether that's our flesh, whether that's a job, whether that's even our families. I know a lot of people who are in really toxic family relationships where the families kind of hold each other captive. And so that's a situation that can happen. I think we can be slaves to just about anything, and we can choose to be slaves to God.
Yes.
Now, is being a slave to God something that's bad?
No, that's biblical. Being slaves. So we're all slaves in general. So the core of the gospel is that we are removing, or Jesus has removed bondage of slavery to sin. But people forget to study the rest of the scripture, and it says that we are bought. It doesn't say that we are. It doesn't just stop with we're released, or we're released from the bondage of sin or Satan. We're bought. Therefore, we're no longer slaves to sin or Satan, whatever name you want to put on it. We're now slaves to Christ. And we need to behave and act as such, because that, which we will talk about soon, will bring the most freedom in your life.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a great question. Let me ask this to everybody. Yeah, let's ask this to everybody. Is there freedom in submission?
Yeah.
Like, leave a comment. What do you think about that phrase, freedom in submission? Yeah. By submitting and giving yourself up, are you actually making yourself free?
Yeah. I remember I read a whole book on this when I was in Bible college. And I think that was one of the bigger ones that shifted the way that I think in my relationship with Christ, is submission, obedience, faithfulness. But it's all wrapped up in being a slave to Christ. What do you think, John? Is that when was this idea brought up to you, or is it just something that you always knew?
I think, I mean, I was a preacher's kid, so I was in church like anytime the doors were open. It didn't matter if it was a women's event, I had to go.
Yeah.
But
You were slaves to your dad.
I was slave to the church. Yes. I think Dave Birdwhistle would call it a drug problem. I was drug to the church every time the doors were open.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I think the freedom and submission to Christ is that now there's some freedom in my choices I don't make based on me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, the freedom comes in knowing that because I trust in what God is going to do, I don't have to be the one that carries all the weight. I don't have to be the one that has to be in charge of everything. One of our people says, yes, you trust in God to be in control. And and another Facebook user, makes me free. Absolutely. I mean, there's a freedom in knowing that it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are our own worst enemies a lot of times when it comes to decision making and in just how we lead our lives, because we make, I think sometimes, I think God has a really high expectation for us, but I think we have a stupid expectation in certain areas. Does that make, you're laughing? I'm gonna let you go on with it because you know where I'm coming from on this. Why don't you kind of talk about that a little bit?
It just makes me, because we had a similar conversation to this. I think it might have been yesterday, and I said in ministry or just in life, I never make a decision based on what I think. I always have the initial, I have the initial idea. I go to other people. I try to get input on it to try to make sure it's the best that it can be. But every single time I say, like, this is my idea, I'm doing it, it's going to be awesome, every single time it sucks. And it never comes out good, and people are confused. And I just found out if I try to do things on my own, my expectation will never become reality.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I think we also have an expectation on other people.
That too. Yeah.
When we submit to God, we understand that God is in control.
Yes.
And we are not. And we can't go around and think that we are going to make people do what we think they should do, because only God can change people.
Yes.
I think that's a huge statement. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Only God can change people. When I meet people as a Christian, my job is not to change them.
No.
That has never been the job of a Christian. The job of the Christian is to introduce people to Christ so that Christ can change them, so that he can be involved in their lives and he can make the change happen. But a lot of times we get into this situation like Dave talked about on Sunday, the impose versus propose situation, which is where I'm going to step into your life and I'm going to tell you everything you're doing wrong. And I'm going to make sure you feel so crappy about it that you want to be a Christ follower, because we know that works every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a conversation recently, another conversation. It's like we talk a lot, like we work together, with the senior minister up in Hillsong Church in New York. And he always, for a long time, he probably still does, got a lot of flack for not standing up and talking about what the church was against.
Right.
He's like, I'm not going to say that. Like, that's not my place to say that. In a recent podcast I listened to, he explained why he said that. He said, it's not my job to impose my beliefs on people. I'm supposed to share Christ with them and hopefully bring them along so Christ can change their life, and so that they can follow down the narrow path towards God. I can't like forcefully push them down this path. It's not going to work, and they're not going to listen to me. And I really like that.
I think it even comes down to, like, if you think about people who have addiction,
Mm-hmm.
if they are forced to go into a facility for rehabilitation, they typically never succeed.
Yeah.
It's not until they want it themselves. And so you can't shove Jesus down someone's throat and expect them to not choke on it. Um, you've got to treat people in such a way where there's relationship, there's love, and then people will want to come along and follow and learn who Christ is. And the problem is that we don't come in with this proposal of, hey, I'd like you to meet Christ. We always come in with this imposition of, you got to change your life because you're going straight to hell right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, if we're not doing what Christ wants, we're going to hell. I mean, that's pretty biblical, but I don't think that's necessarily the best play when you're going to talk to someone for the first time about Christ.
No.
But what I think it comes down to, and let some of you guys who are watching just kind of answer this, but do you struggle when people don't think like you do? Dave talked about this a little on Sunday, especially when it comes to politics.
Yeah. Yeah. I always struggle with people that don't think like I do when they don't think like I do.
How so, Rob?
I'm just joking. I don't mind it. It's not as a big a deal. I do have to often though. Whoa, we switched. I do have to often sit in my office and take a little bit to respond to text messages or phone calls, because sometimes I have to remind myself that it's not all about me, and that they probably have an idea because of or they're thinking about something differently because of a certain situation in their life, and it's probably not wrong.
Right.
But my first inclination is always like, oh, they're wrong. Why are they thinking that way? They should think like me because I'm right. Especially my kid. I don't know why my kid keeps smacking me in the face and wants to like rip every book off the bookshelf. Doesn't make any sense. Why would he do that?
And he's going to do that for a few years, just so you know. Jack still loves tearing every book in his bookshelf off of that and just throwing them on the floor for no reason. He's not reading a single one. He's not even going to look through most of them. He just wants them on the floor.
Yes.
So Ray Basham says, well, and how many times do we make a suggestion to people in such a way that they thought it was their idea? That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm looking around my camera. Yeah.
What do you think about that question?
How many times do we make suggestions to people? I don't know. I want to think about it. You answer this one. Give me a second to think about this one.
Well, I think I'm getting out of focus here. I'm gonna come in real quick and come back out. When I first got into ministry, I had a worship minister pull me aside and he said, listen, senior minister here really likes to make sure that everything we do is his idea. I said, okay. And he goes, so if you have a really good idea, go talk to him about it and just mention it as an idea. Then a week later, go mention it to him again. And then a couple days after that, mention it again. And then start just talking about it so that it makes it sound like he came up with it. And anytime I did that, all of a sudden it happened. Like, it was the most amazing thing in the world. It was like I don't know, some kind of a social experiment. But for some reason, the senior minister really liked these ideas that he came up with, even though I came up with the idea, but I let him have that feeling as though he came up with it.
Man, I'm really bad at that.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm terrible at it. I can't do that. I've tried, and I guess I'm a terrible communicator in that way. I can get shut down too quick, or maybe I'm just surrounded with really smart people and I'm not that smart, which is also a big possibility.
I'm not believing that one, but now what I will say is, you don't want to manipulate people into Christ either. You gotta be really careful with that. But it is good when you get somebody to where they see the way you're living, and you can suggest it as an idea, as a thought, but doing it in such a way where somebody goes, JK is good at it. I don't know who you are, but you maybe know me more than you should. But
Dave.
it's probably Kibler. But people need to come to Christ on their own terms. They just do. You can't make someone come to Christ the way you did. You can't make people fall in love with Christ the way you did. It has to be their way. It has to be how they come to Christ. And I think that's really hard on somebody who's not willing to submit. I think it's really hard when you see what people do and you don't understand why they're not doing it the way you suggested or the way you offered it up. And I think that comes down to this whole thing of other people's decisions are not about us.
Yeah.
They're just not. It's not something that it's Marty Allen.
Nice.
So let's see. Well, and I meant it was if we impose it, people are more reluctant. If we propose it, it's more of a consideration, not manipulation. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But here's sometimes we think that people that we know and love, that we get it in our heads and we don't do it intentionally, but people make decisions and somehow we make it personal towards us.
Yeah.
Somebody makes a decision about who they're going to vote for or what team they're going to follow or what friend they're going to be friends with. And we just make it all about us. And I think that's where the freedom and submission needs to come in, because we need to understand that we're not the center of the universe.
Yep.
And I think that's hard for some people. I mean, what do you think about that?
No, I agree. I think what I see the most, the voting for thing is probably just a current thing that obviously we're in the middle of it. So that's the biggest thing that people are talking about. But what I see in between voting years is when somebody has an idea about somebody on how they should live their life because it would better their life. So that would be, we can go back to the drug addiction. We can go to if they need to start taking care of themselves, like health, like working out or eating better. Maybe they should go to a certain college, maybe, a certain school, take certain classes, do a certain thing with their life. Parents of high school students. And that person, whatever the situation is, does not do what you think is best for their life. And people take that really hard. Mm-hmm. They get frustrated with it. So it's like, why don't they just do this? This will be the best thing for them. It'll make their life so much better. And it will actually, I've seen it where it will actually stop friendships, or it will stop movement, even in their own life, because they're bummed out about a decision that somebody else made that actually has no impact in their everyday life.
I would say one of the places I've noticed it a lot is in how to raise a kid.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that raise their kids and they think that what they did was good, and it might be good.
Yeah.
But as a parent, I'm raising my kid the way I'm raising my kid.
Yeah. And I will listen, but if I don't think I'm going to do something the way you do it, it's not because I don't like you. It's because that's not how I'm going to raise my kid. Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of people who, I mean, you hear the conversations. Here's a great statement. I'm going to put this up here. I think we often believe because we're older or have more experience, we try to impose ourselves. That's true. That is true. And I think I'm going to go along with that. I'm going to even say, as a minister,
best parents are those.
Did you see this one? Yeah.
Yes.
The best parents are those with no kids. Yeah. They really are good parents. Their kids never have any problems.
Yeah.
But as an older minister, it's really hard sometimes to not step in when younger ministers are getting ready to do something really dumb.
Yep.
And stop them.
Yep.
But I've realized that I had to make those mistakes to learn.
Yeah.
And I had to go through those growing pains to learn. And sometimes we don't realize that the stuff you went through is what taught you the lessons so that you are who you are. Yes. And sometimes you got to let people learn those lessons.
Yeah.
My kids, I'm not a helicopter parent at all. I'm not negligent, but I'm pretty dang close sometimes, because I just kind of let my kids play and do their thing. And I don't really try and look over them and protect them all the time. My son, I think if tripping and falling and hitting your face was a sport, he'd be a gold medalist. And you know what? We brush him off, we get him up, we let him keep running. And he's learning along the way. Okay, don't run through that, because if I trip on that, I'm going to fall and hit my face.
Correct.
And sometimes that's what people need. And I think until you're able to submit to the idea that I don't have to be in control of everything, I don't have to have the utmost control of every single situation, even when it comes to our kids. And that's a hard one, because I think as parents, sometimes we can get so caught up in protecting our kids that we actually hold them back a little. And now I don't have kids in their teenage years yet, so I don't know if I'm going to be like chaining my daughter up to the house and telling her she can't go out because she's so pretty. You know, I don't know if I'm going to be doing that or not. I probably will have a shotgun, and Marty will probably be sitting on my porch with me. But I think that there has to come a point when there's trust. Have you ever done the trust fall?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You have to fall backwards and just hope these people are going to catch you.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Especially when you're bigger, especially when you're the biggest kid out there.
Yeah. I think trusting in God is, and Marty said, yes, sir, he will be out there with me with a shotgun. I think trusting in God is like we're standing at the top of the Grand Canyon and he's just holding one hand out down at the bottom of it, you know, and we have to be willing to fall that length so that he can catch us and hold us up.
Yeah.
How would you see, what's the difference between trusting in God and trusting in other things?
I saw a quote, actually, I think right before I came back from lunch. It was a quote from a minister in Life Church. Where is he at? And wherever.
Oklahoma City.
Yeah. He said, in order to completely follow and hold on to God, you have to first let go of whatever you're holding on behind you. You can't fully hold on with two hands. And you know this because you're a kid, where a kid wants to hold 17 different things, but they only have two hands, and they get frustrated that they can't hold everything. And that's what we do. We laugh at kids because they do it all the time, because they get mad that they can't hold 6 pillows and their brother is holding 1 pillow. But in reality, we need to let go of all that so that we can hold on to Christ, because that's the only way we can fully submit to him.
Yeah, he needs both of our hands, not just one of them.
Yeah.
It's funny you say it, because like just the other day, Jack, my son, for those of you who don't know him, he's 2 years old and he's a ball of fire. We were doing cleanup, and he was trying to get as much stuff as he could. And he had his arms full of stuff, and he wanted one more thing. And every time he tried to pick it up, something else fell out, and he started screaming. He was so angry that he couldn't get all of this in his arms at one time. And he was so furious. And I had to tell him it was okay. You don't have to have everything in your hands. You can just take what you can handle and take it back. And but you're right. Sometimes I think we as Christians, we try to take on the world.
Yep.
We don't stand beside God and do whatever it is he's leading us to do. We just try and do it ourselves.
Yep.
We take on too much volunteering in the church. There's an old saying that 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people, and that's true. Most of the church work is done by a very small portion of church people. And what ends up happening is burnout, frustration, bitterness. And it does not, it doesn't help you get stronger in your faith in God. If anything, it makes you want to submit less, because you're thinking, well, why is God letting all this happen? But the truth is, you've never submitted in the first place.
Yeah.
Because you're just trying to do it all.
I know.
Renee said one big difference is other things have at least once let me down. Usually more, and God never has.
Yep.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah. There's one senior minister in Oklahoma as well, that he was such a control freak that his executive minister made him take 2 months off, and he makes him take 2 months off every single year. And he takes away his phone and his social media, and he sends him to like somewhere in Florida or something like that. And it's a good just thing away. But the purpose of it was you need to stop forcing things to happen and allow God to work.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was the best thing for me, because I don't recommend most senior ministers leaving your church for 2 months.
What about discipleship ministers? You think discipleship ministers could take 2 months and
yeah, why not
go to Florida for,
I mean, that's what youth ministers do in the summer anyways, right? We just
right. It's all vacation, right?
Yeah, it's just vacation. But I think it shows a lot where we try to do everything ourselves. And I think this brings up another point that Dave made. And we never allow any room for God to work. And that is, goes back to the original point of we just try to do everything ourselves, and we get mad when we don't get our way. And it's a burden. It's a huge burden in our life.
And one of the things that Dave really hit on that I loved was he talked about the relationships involved in, my wife just texted me privately and said, you wouldn't go to Florida. You'd go to the mountains.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she's not wrong, but there's the Florida Trail. One of the things that Dave talked about on Sunday was this idea that relationships, our relationship with God and our relationship with others is affected by this need to be in control. And he actually brought up the upcoming election and just talked about how many people right now, if you were to ask them if they would even associate with somebody who was to vote for a person they weren't voting for, would they have anything to do with them? And they said no.
Yeah.
And even if it was family.
I know.
And it's toxic. You know what I mean? Like when we have this inability to love people because they don't think like we do. There's a huge movement going on through the US right now of cancel culture, where if you don't believe like I do, if you don't think like I do, if you don't do the things that I do, and if you don't agree that what I do, even though it goes against your beliefs, is okay, then you are dead to me.
Yep.
And this country is the most divided I've ever seen it, probably in my lifetime. What's going to be the thing that's going to turn the tide in that, or can anything turn the tide in that at this point? I mean, what do you think, Rob? What's got to happen for people to get past their differences and realize that it's just the way you think and it's the way I think?
Yeah, I think people need to guard themselves a little bit more. I always say, my phrase that I always say is, you need to get over yourself. Stop taking yourself so seriously. And also protect people that can't handle it. Like, just because you have information about something, or doesn't mean you need to say it. Like, the valuing others above yourself is really gonna have to take effect. And people need to stop doing as thou will.
Yeah.
It's really dangerous. And that's the reason, like, nobody knows who I vote for. When I say nobody, like, I don't tell anybody. You guys don't know. My wife doesn't even know who I vote for, because one, I don't want to impact somebody else's vote. That's not my job as a minister to do that. And two, there's no reason to allow somebody else to stop talking to me, because they are in a weak place in their life, and they're really frustrated about, like, the election. And they're going to stop talking to me or be friends with me because I voted for somebody else.
Yeah.
I'd rather just eliminate that from the source and not even go down that path with somebody. But that's just a personal thing for me. And that has set myself up to continue to have normal conversations with people without talking about who I voted for or who this person voted for. And I think at the core of that, I think that's what we need to do as a society. And that's the only way back. That's outside of giving the typical Jesus answer of, well, if everybody just became Christians, then we'd all be good. And, like, we wouldn't have to worry about any of this.
Yeah. Cause Christians never fight.
Yeah.
That never happens. Honestly, for me, I tell everybody who I vote for. I always vote for whichever rap star is going up for the election. So I'm voting Kanye West, straight ticket all the way.
Yeah. Okay.
Just kidding. We do have a comment though from I think this is Marty, but it says it's hard to handle that God already knows the outcome of things, especially the election. Really hard. But when we get it, it's easier to submit, and I end up fighting myself often. And I would say there's a lot of us that are like that. We have a tough time just saying, "Okay, God, you got this." You know, you talk to people right now, a lot of really good Christian people right now, and they will tell you they are terrified of what's going to happen after this election.
Yeah.
But I think as Christians, we shouldn't be terrified about what's going to happen after an election. We should still know that our hope is in Christ, and that end game says we're going to heaven.
Yeah, I struggle with that. And maybe because I'm a minister and my whole life revolves, like my job, everything revolves around scripture. But it's funny to me that people are so okay with the fact that there's a heaven and there's a hell, and accept whatever God does with their life, but they're terrified of something that's going to happen in a month and will probably only really impact their life for 4 years or 8 years.
8 at the most. Yeah.
8 at the most.
Yeah.
That kind of always confused me, that the core of the Christian faith, or the thing, is faith, which is believing something that you can't like tangibly touch, you can't tangibly point to,
right?
Which is Jesus Christ, because he ascended into heaven. We don't have a physical grave of him. We don't have a physical thing of him that we're like, this was God. We have to believe in something we can't physically see. But we're terrified of the things we can see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think too, I think we get so easily distracted by what's going on right now.
Yeah.
This fear of the immediate, what is happening currently, it really engulfs a lot of us. And we get to a point where we're so focused on that, we lose sight of the end goal, which the end goal is we win,
Yeah.
And if there's any reason to submit to God, it's the simple fact that we know that when it all comes to the end of the day, we win.
Yes.
There's no losing here for us. Yeah. And it might get difficult along the way.
Yeah.
But I don't see any Christians being pulled into stadiums and being eaten by lions right now.
In the United States.
First century Christian.
Yeah.
That's literally what they were facing. And so when you read that he's telling those people to submit to him, and they know that if I submit to God, my life will be on the line.
Yeah. It's comfort.
Yeah. I think it's amazing how little we understand suffering as 21st century Christians.
In the United States. Yes.
What's that?
In the United States.
In the United States, yes.
Yeah.
In other countries, absolutely, yeah, like Pakistan and India and places like that, Nepal. We get made fun of when we think we're being persecuted.
Yes.
It's like, dude, I got made fun of for my last name when I was a kid. I got called Jelly Belly Kelly all the freaking time, and I was skinny back then, But getting picked on or made fun of is not persecution.
No.
I think we have such a screwed up understanding of what that is. And we take it when people get on us, we make people our enemies. When the Bible tells us that our battle is not against flesh and blood. Our battle is against demons and against Satan, the heavenly realm. Like that is where our battle is. As a matter of fact, Romans 12:18 says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And I don't know if there's a more difficult scripture out there than that for us, especially nowadays, because in such an over-politicized state that we're in right now, like the nation is just insane right now. I was watching this morning where the NBA was confused. Like, I can't believe that people weren't watching the championship series because we had the most famous basketball player of the last 20 years was playing on the most marketed basketball team in the world in the Los Angeles Lakers, and nobody was watching. And what it came down to is it became political. And like everybody's so tired of politics, and yet the one escape, sports, entertainment, became political. And of course nobody watched it because nobody wanted to hear that. And all of this to say, everybody wants a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's looking for an enemy right now. And it's scary to see even people within the church, the anger and the malice and the unrest that's going on based on things that aren't even spiritual.
I know.
Where am I off base in saying that? Because if I am, tell me.
You're right. People don't. People. Okay. I don't want to say people. We're us as humans. Comfort is the most vital thing in our life. Like, we want to be comfortable. Even our internal beings. Like, if we injure ourselves really bad, our mind will shut off certain things in our body so that we won't feel pain, because we have to feel comfort at all times. So if you snap your arm in half, people say like the adrenaline goes to you and you don't like really feel it at first. Now, eventually it's going to be painful, but at first your body is protecting you, because comfort is the most important thing. And we've put that into our life, and all things in the world and in past history, even the most bad things started just because of comfort. Mm-hmm. All the wars, even all wars, all the world wars started because somebody was uncomfortable and they refused to be at peace with somebody else. So they wanted to eliminate the thing that they didn't want to be at peace with. And this can go into a whole another 17-hour podcast about,
yeah, it could.
You could go into school, into masks, into, I mean, anything like, but we can just end with be at peace with anyone. And is it before you get frustrated with somebody? I think the question is not if they're right or wrong, but okay, with my idea of what I think, how do I be at peace with that person who thinks differently than me? And I think peace before right.
And I think it comes down to one understanding, and that's I am my only responsibility. I am not responsible for that person. That person is not responsible for me. The fact that they go off the handle dealing with a situation doesn't mean that I have the right to do that, because I only control me.
Yeah.
I have to be at peace. I have to do everything in my power to be at peace, regardless. And that's the big thing. Regardless is a huge word here. Regardless of how they act.
Mm-hmm.
If it's possible, I need to be the peaceful one.
Yeah.
I need to be the example. I can't change that person.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I can try really hard, but it's not happening. I have to make sure how I react, how I interact, how I act, period. It all has to be on me. I make the decision every day when I get up that I represent Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Period. And how I represent Jesus Christ is up to me. How Rob Harlamert represents Jesus Christ is up to Rob Harlamert. Same with Marty Allen, who's on here. Marty Allen is responsible for Marty Allen. I'm not responsible for Marty. You're not responsible for Marty. Marty's not responsible for either one of us.
Yeah.
We're only responsible for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so when we get to that point where we realize submitting to God suddenly says, okay, the whole world is not my responsibility. Everything that happens around me is not my responsibility. My only responsibility is that I love the Lord, our God, with my heart, my soul, my mind, and my strength.
Mm-hmm.
That I give him everything. And that needs to be my sole focus and my only focus. And that it's not my responsibility to make sure that Rob Harlamert watches what he says, or that he doesn't fly off the handle when he gets into deep political conversations or whatever. Yeah. I mean, it's just, that's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
And at the same time, when you don't act the way that I wouldn't act, I can't be upset with you either. I can't be mad at you. I can't look at you and say, I can't believe he's not acting how I expect him to act. And it's funny. Renee says, I tell my kids this all the time. You take care of you, I'll deal with her. And that is actually that's something I tell my kids too. My daughter is always trying to boss my son around.
Yep.
And vice versa. They are just hilarious when they get into those moods, but
Yes.
they don't need to be the boss of each other. I often refer to my much younger, less wise self to remember to allow others to have their thoughts and opinions. And that's true. If you want people to value your opinion, you probably ought to value theirs.
Yes. Yes.
So
that's why you listen first. The thing that people hate when I say this, and it goes back to, you get mad when other people make decisions that you don't think are right. And I say, well, they're an adult. They can make their own decision. And it's like, they're not your kid. Even when I try to make decisions for my kid, he smiles and laughs at me most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 10 months old. I can't imagine what he's going to be like when he's older. But if you can't allow adults to make their own decision, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to live in a frustrated state, and that will take years off your life.
Yeah.
It can negatively, it will make your heart weak. It will turn your body to produce things inside of yourself that will give you diseases. Your body is not designed to be frustrated, and your body will literally shut down if you live in that way. And that's the same thing with sin. People think it's just a spiritual thing, but sin is also a health thing. Like, if you sin in your life, your body will literally shut down and it will react negatively to the world. And we need to remember that.
Yep. Well, and Renee said, I'm a lot more willing to listen to you if you are also willing to listen to me. If my opinions aren't considered, I'm a lot less willing to listen to you and take it to heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's most people. I mean, if we aren't willing to listen to, and I think this is the hardest part right now, especially if you watch a lot of these riots that have been going on and some of the stuff, you just see people yelling at each other and they don't breathe. I don't even know how to get all these words out because they can't be breathing because it's constantly coming out. But how many times when you're talking to somebody, as they're talking, you're already thinking about what you're going to say next? I had to catch myself on that years ago. Whenever I was talking to somebody, I wasn't actually listening to their response as much as I was thinking, okay, here's what I want to say next. Here's how I want to prove that I'm right next. And I think maturity says, I don't need to focus on my rebuttal. I need to focus on what they're saying. And I think it's a huge thing. And we got about 10 minutes left. And I just want to go back to one last thing here. And I just want to use this phrase, let God be God. We are not capable of being God. We cannot change a person's heart. We cannot change their life. We can only bring them to the feet of Christ and allow him to do the hard work. Really, if you think about it, as Christians, we kind of have the easy job. Our job is, JK just burned me too. Whoa. I don't know what just happened there, but okay. There has to be a point where we realize God is in control and we are not. We are not capable of doing God's job. We can do the work of God as he has told us to do, but we can't be God. It's just not possible. We can try all we want, but it can't happen. It just can't happen. Rob, how do you feel about that?
You can't do what you're not designed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to take a screw that is designed to have a flathead screwdriver, you can't take a Phillips head to it correctly and get it out. It's not going to work. What we were, designed to do as humans is to take care of this earth, to worship God with everything that we have and trust him. And now as we go into scripture more, we're now supposed to go into all the world and make disciples and share Jesus with everyone. That's what we're supposed to do. Nowhere in scripture does it say that we were designed to die for other people, for their faith. Like, we're not supposed to do that. We can't do that. If we do, then our death kind of means nothing, because we didn't save anyone from hell for dying.
Yeah.
That's Jesus's job, and he already did that for us. And when people try to do something that they're not designed to do, you're going to be frustrated.
Absolutely.
You're going to think that you failed all the time. You're going to think that you're not doing enough with your life. You're going to be highly underwhelmed with the results of what you're producing. And the final thing is you're not going to produce the fruit that God wants us to produce.
That's the truth. And I think just to kind of wrap it all up, when you have the burden of having to have your own way, you will find yourself lonely.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find yourself depressed, and you'll find yourself empty.
Yep.
Because when your only purpose and only reason for living is yourself, there's not a whole lot there.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're able to surrender and able to say, God, you take over, you take control, we're living for something much bigger. And we find ourselves in a battle for something that matters, and that's eternity. And so appreciate you getting on here today, man, and talking about this.
It's always fun.
This was a good talk. But just a few quick announcements. I'm going to let Rob go because I know he's got a meeting he's got to get to. They're planning stuff for Elevate. Maybe we'll spy on him and put it online or something.
No. Not that exciting.
Well, enjoy your meeting, man. I'll talk to you later.
See you guys.
All right. So just as a recap of just some announcements earlier, for those of you who weren't on here, there's a Thanksgiving offering coming up November 22nd. We're going to use that to get the building up to code by fixing up the entrance doors, the electric, the plexiglass on the windows, and getting a new air conditioning compressor if the money is there for that. Our building is 104 years old, and it's got some 104-year-old problems. So we want to get those things fixed. So start praying now about what you and your family are going to do to give for that. We do these offerings once a year. We really try and avoid a lot of special offerings at Catalyst, but this is one that we try and do every single year so that we can do a good job and be good stewards of this building that God's given us. Also, we have a live Catalyst worship night coming up, a night of worship, Tuesday, November 24th. Really excited about that. We're going to have a lot of people hopefully coming out for that just to spend a night of worship. My personal hope is that the election's over at that point and everybody's going to be calmed down by that point. We'll be about 3 weeks removed from the election. So hopefully we'll live in a much more calm, happy environment at that point. We're also needing some children's volunteers. You guys can see on the screen what our needs are. These are not every week needs. These are once a month needs. So if you're somebody who would like to teach in children's or be a part of that, or even just be a helper, you can do that. We can always use baby holders. Our nursery it's just got a lot of babies because we have very fertile people in our church. So make sure you get signed up for that. You just have to contact jross at catalystchristian.net. And one last little announcement, Elevate Christian Church, which we're planting that church next year. Rob Harlemer will be the senior minister. They are selling t-shirts right now for $10. All the proceeds are going towards the church plant. So contact Rob Harlemer or go to elevatelex.church. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you all. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you on Sunday.